Hello and welcome to our daily sketching routine. It is Friday, March 28th, 2025, and today's topic, I'm going to call it Intermediate Level Drawing. This video will be called Overview, and it's actually going to be on another page. But to begin with, I'm going to go over this page, which I sketched back in November, and I'd been meaning to go over these topics, but it took a while. But before we begin, welcome back if you are returning, and welcome if you're new to the channel. I sketch and post every day, and I use a timer to stay focused and to build a habit. So I'll start a 10-minute timer, and this will be a deep dive, which basically means several videos on the same kind of topic. Plus, I'll have to revisit these things later on once I learn more stuff. And then the intermediate level drawing is kind of the subtopic, if you will. Also, the playlist is going to go into the basics, although this isn't beginner level. I don't really have a beginner playlist. Beginner stuff is kind of mixed in there too. But specifically, it'll be intermediate. It'll take several videos and then also more videos in the future, like I said. But just to begin with, this was just kind of a list of things that I had originally come up with, kind of brainstormed real quick, and I will add to it and refine it. But as I'm looking at it, it's not too bad. Like, it's mostly what I consider like intermediate level drawing. I can post a picture of this on the community post, so I'm going to refer to it because I'm going to sketch on another page, but I'm going to refer to this page, and then I'll post a picture of it on the community section of the channel. And plus, yeah, I haven't looked at it since then, but I just have this feeling. That's usually how I do it. I sort of have an intuition, and part of it is my own kind of readiness to do it. Since November, I mean, I've done a lot of drawing like every day. So yeah, let's just go over this list real quick. We've got anatomy, and I basically just kind of illustrated like the different topics. So like anatomy, and I've done videos on that. I have a figure drawing specifically playlist. Then there's also anatomy of animals, and then also just like anatomy of anything. So it's just kind of like how it's put together, like all the parts and how they function is basically the anatomy. One thing before moving on, any of these things could actually be sort of like your life's work or like the thing that you're passionate about. So this is sort of touching upon all of those things, but you might have like a specific thing that you really enjoy or that you're really good at, just like kind of naturally. I'm not sure. So for example, with me, like I'm pretty good at drawing like characters basically. So then next we have construction. Construction is kind of like this, where part of it is anatomy, but you actually don't have to know anatomy. It helps, but like really it's the bridge between like knowing the anatomy and like knowing how to draw whatever it is, the subject, in different ways, because the construction is like an abstraction or a simplified way of drawing the subject. Life drawing is basically looking at something from life and drawing it. I don't think I have an example of that here actually, but basically you could draw like your hand, or if you have like somebody to draw like a portrait of, or like a still life kind of thing. And so that's kind of its own thing. It relies upon observation and also like hand-eye coordination, and yeah, it's pretty helpful. Copying is really what like reference is. So you could get really good at copying stuff, or you can kind of just use it sort of like life drawing. You could try to make it look exactly like the life drawing, but I just call that copying basically. Like when you're looking at like a picture and then you're drawing it, that's not really life drawing, that's copying. Imagination is sort of like doodling. It can look like anything, and it's pretty fun, and I feel like it's sort of how kids get started. And so it's kind of its own thing because it doesn't have to look like anything. So it's just imagination. And memory is wherever, if you draw something enough, you start to memorize it. If you don't really know what it looks like, then it's hard to like from imagination. So it kind of goes together. The habit, that's kind of what I've been talking about this week, actually, with the Artist Life series that I just did for several days. I just sum it up as habit, but really it's like the practice, it's the rituals and the routines. It's pretty personal. I was just sharing like what I do, and yeah, like, and I change it up. I mean, I adapt to like whatever life situation I'm in, but it is important. It's like that's like the practice. Composition has to do with, it's kind of like this. So this is the rest of the page, but like I said, I'll post this page on the channel. Part of the composition is even like a sketchbook page can be composed in a way. So for example, you've got like different size figures, you've got different subject matter, but like it looks okay. There are kind of, like that was the example. Like there are kind of rules like the golden ratio or like the thirds and all of that. Like that's kind of its own thing. So like I said, like any of these things could be, several videos could kind of cover any of these topics. Perspective. So you've got different kinds of perspective, like even like with figures, making them look like they are on the same plane. Same with that. That's like perspective. You've got rendering. So rendering is, part of it is like the medium. So if you're using pen and ink like I usually do, the way you render stuff has like a look to it, like the style, same thing. I've talked about all of these things in some capacity. I'm just kind of working on like organizing my thoughts here, but that's like the overview of it. And just to get some sketching done, just kind of go down the list and like sketch some things and just kind of talk about it. First, maybe I can talk about like the idea of like intermediate level. Now, part of why I was inspired to even go back to this topic is because in yesterday's video, I talked about like the plateau, like kind of reaching a plateau. I sort of talked about how I got into keeping a sketchbook and everything. I kind of think of the intermediate level as kind of the plateau. Like it's kind of a long journey, and I'll do my best to kind of help people out who wants to draw and are kind of in that level. So just to begin with, so stuff like anatomy, like one thing, for example, I don't draw animals all the time. Anatomy and like construction. So you can use like stick figures and stuff like that. And again, I'll go into each thing a little bit more. Plus I have examples and I'll kind of like bring that up. This is sort of an overview, and plus I want to sketch today. So this is really me just kind of sketching, but then also kind of giving an overview. So part of anatomy is kind of, you can make stuff up once you kind of sort of get it, like get the idea. Because animals, they all look different, and including people look different. And so once you kind of get like the function of it, then you can start to do different things. So that's anatomy. Then the construction is kind of like this, sort of what I'm doing, and that's particular to like the person. There's different ways of constructing. So with anatomy, part of it is just kind of understanding, for example, like the neck muscle, kind of like that, like where does it attach, and like what is it actually doing, like underneath like the surface stuff. So you might have like muscles, and I'm not looking at anatomy, so that would be a good thing to actually have reference. So, and also like the skeleton and stuff. But then construction is kind of how to take this and use it to draw. So once you kind of understand like the anatomy, then the construction kind of helps with the anatomy helps with proportion, And then the construction helps with like the surface, because some of the muscles and stuff isn't really going to show up. So that's what construction helps with. And also that's also anatomy too. Like that's the surface, that's like the skin and everything. So then construction is the bridge between like the anatomy itself, but then having so it's kind of like, that's how you can apply it to actually drawing stuff, basically. And then next we have life drawing. So life drawing, like I'm not looking at anything, but if I could actually sit there and just draw horses, I guess that would be good. And I think because now we have YouTube, you can kind of look up horses, and that's not bad to like look at the ones that are moving around. It might be a little bit better to kind of get a feel for like the life drawing, because it really has to do with life drawing. You actually don't have to know what you're drawing, but it helps with observation. So a good example would be like drawing like your own hand, because it's from life and it's like it's got a lot of complex kind of shapes and stuff. So for example, you can just kind of focus in on, so part of this is like construction, like I was saying, just kind of looking at the forms. So you can just practice looking at something from life, such as your own hand, and part of it is you don't have to think about the anatomy because you're just looking at the thing and drawing it. So that's a good thing to practice. So that's what life drawing is. Like I don't have to know like the anatomy of the thing I'm drawing, because it's working on, it helps you to understand angles. It helps you to understand like the overlapping forms, like I was saying in another video recently. It helps you to understand light and shadow, kind of like this. So it's a very useful thing, and the more you do it, the more you'll start to remember. Copying is like looking at a picture. So I'm just going to look at, since I have a picture of that sketchbook page that I was just showing. So I'm just going to copy something. So for example, I can copy this tank looking thing. So part of copying is looking at a picture. It could be something that somebody else drew. This is just something that I drew on that sketchbook page. And from there, you can either copy it exact or you can add to it. But that's like using reference pictures and stuff. So it's pretty, for me, like it's pretty easy to copy, but it's useful. Sometimes that's what you need to be doing. So it could be a copy of like a picture of a horse or something, and then that way you can kind of do your own thing. And so I'm just copying the thing that I had already sketched, so it is a useful skill, because sometimes you'll have to redraw stuff. So that's copying. And then the next thing would be imagination. So imagination is kind of like this, where I didn't really know what I was going to draw and I just started like doodling something. So for example, let's say I have something like this, and I can just start to like just make a scene. this kind of thing. So this is just kind of make a scene out of it. So part of it is also knowing like perspective and rendering, which is what, like shading and stuff. So to me, like that's like doodling. Is the kind of stuff I would just kind of doodle on homework. So that's like imagination. Memory is kind of sort of like if I'm going to draw people, I mean, I remember part of this horse is sort of from memory just because I've been kind of drawing them. And then also I looked off of something here, but then like I can kind of do like a different version of it because that's like memory. But like basically if you draw something enough, you'll start to remember it. Habit is like the daily sketching routine. So one thing is I do these videos to help myself to build that habit, but then sometimes it's good to know like somebody is doing that, and like if you want to use these videos as kind of a encouragement or motivation or something. So next we've got composition. So that's kind of showing here. So you've got composition has a lot to do with design. So if you have different topics, you can have different sizes. You can like have objects that are kind of coming out of other objects, and part of it is like, yeah, just kind of the layout, the focal point, perspective, which I kind of showed here a little bit. So that was just from like the sketch that I already had, but then you can move it around in perspective. Also, there's different kinds of perspective. So this one, like I don't have any like, well, the horizon line is kind of right here. You can see that. And so everything is a little bit like kind of level. You're not seeing like the top of it or like the bottom of it. And then the further something is away, the smaller. So that's basic perspective. Like you could have some people right here. So that's just kind of like basic perspective. And for the most part, you can kind of get away with that with illustrations and comics, if you kind of know like why it looks like that. Really, it's about like depth. And I mean, yeah, but yeah, that's go into more detail about that. And then the rendering is, part of it is like the crosshatch. Part of it is the fact that it's pen and ink. So that's rendering. And then like the style has to do with, again, like the pen and ink and stuff. Crosshatch is a style. Rendering might have a little bit more to do with like the idea of light and shadow, like how you do it, the understanding of that. So that's everything that's on that list. And like I said, I will post a picture of the previous page, and this is an overview, and each one can kind of be explored for a while depending on what's interesting to you and like what you want to learn. But that'll be it for today, and I'll talk about this some more in the next several videos. So I want to thank you for joining me for our daily sketching routine, and if you enjoy these videos, please support the channel. I appreciate it, and until next time, keep on sketching.